All right, so we've reached the time of the NBA season where the rumors have officially taken center stage. They've heated up the headlines. They're sparking up everywhere. We've seen big names, bigger names than usual even, come up this time around, and there are two players that I really want to hone in on more than usual because these are two guys who could really, really change the landscape of everything, not only this year, but going forward in years in the future. The first guy I want to touch on is, of course, Jimmy Butler. So if you've been living under a rock for the past, I guess it's been a few weeks now, Jimmy Butler, Pat Riley, the Miami Heat, Shams Charania, the NBA reporter who breaks all the trade news, have had a big time back and forth saying that trade rumors have been validated by Jimmy's camp, by Jimmy's team, by Jimmy himself. And we see even now, he comes out after a game a couple days ago and says that he doesn't think he can find his joy playing basketball in Miami anymore. Up until then, though, it was denied from Jimmy's camp that these rumors really had any validity, saying that Shams' tweets about the situation were baseless. We see now, though, obviously, that Jimmy's fed up. Jimmy's done with Miami, and he wants out. So what does that mean for not only just Jimmy Butler going forward, but what does that mean for the Miami Heat going forward? Starting with Jimmy Butler, a couple of teams were mentioned initially that he might be linked to, that he might prefer over any other destination. Those teams including the Golden State Warriors, the Phoenix Suns, the Dallas Mavericks, and a few others who were thrown in a little later. But those were the big three. Those are the big three. All Western Conference teams, all teams who could use another piece to really step into what they may consider to be contention, although some of those teams are doing better than others at this point. But then, obviously, it comes out a couple days ago that Jimmy's fed up. Jimmy's done. So now we see the reports that the Heat have made him available for trade talks officially, and he's on the table for everybody. He's on the table for anybody to make an offer for, which has drawn some interest. It's drawn some interest from teams around the league. And we've seen the odds kind of shift in the last couple of days. We've seen teams like the Memphis Grizzlies who have rose up the odds as a potential landing spot for Jimmy Butler. I don't know how I feel about that. But the Warriors are still a consistent one where we've seen if the Warriors were to want to acquire Jimmy Butler, it would cost Jonathan Kuminga as the centerpiece of a trade, which we've seen be the case for a lot of hypothetical Warriors trades that have been put in the air, and even some that maybe fell through, talking about Larry Markkinen in the offseason. But also, what does this mean going forward? Because Jimmy Butler is on an expiring contract. He's a player who makes over $50 million. He's 35 years old. It's tough to imagine a world where Jimmy Butler gets a long-term contract going forward for even similar money. Now, maybe he gets, around like the 30 to 40 range, but I don't know if a 4-year contract is in the cards for Jimmy Butler at this point. He has, this season, speaking only about this season, he's been very inconsistent. There have been games, especially lately, of course, where he's just been completely checked out, and he's not there. His head is not there. It's obviously not there. And maybe it's just a product of circumstance, but he does, like he said, he doesn't have any joy playing basketball right now, which at his peak in the playoff runs that the Heat have made over the past 5 years, Jimmy Butler is playing inspired basketball where he's literally giving it his all every single minute of every single game. And we know that regular season Jimmy Butler is a lot different than playoff run Jimmy Butler, as we've seen in the past. But he's 35 years old. How much more does he have in the tank? That's got to be a question that these GMs are taking into account. So what's the realistic asking price? I don't think Golden State is going to want to come off Jonathan Kuminga for Jimmy Butler. I think it would take, even with the Larry Markkinen deal that fell through in the offseason, the Warriors were unwilling to move Brandon Podziemski, their second-year player now, who has not gotten off to the best start. He's been a little better lately, but they were unwilling to get off pods to go get an all-star caliber player like Larry Markkinen, who could really be benefiting the Warriors right now, who are hovering around 500. And Steph Curry called the other day what the kids call mid. I would say they're pretty mid right now. But yeah, the market for Jimmy Butler is really a mystery. It's going to be very interesting to watch going forward. But also, on the other hand, you've got a team in the Miami Heat who have, their intentions are trying to win. They have playoff caliber players. They have players who have been there before, players who have been to the finals. Bam hasn't been great. I know I've been a big Bam guy on this channel. Bam has not been great to start the season. He has his good games here and there. He also has his stinkers. I think it's also important to note that the last that I've seen of the Miami Heat was yesterday, a game where they lost by 36 to the Utah Jazz. So they've left. I've still got this terrible taste in my mouth of Miami Heat basketball currently. I'll try not to, let that influence all of my thoughts about them right now. But Tyler Hero's been really great, and he's really shown that he can be your go-to guy. Now, maybe not on a championship caliber team, but he can get you buckets in the clutch. He's been one of the best clutch players in the league this year. So, and you're going to have to really dig into him and pay him at some point. So the writing has been on the wall kind of for a while that Jimmy Butler's run with the Heat was probably over. But now with all this, it's inevitable, and it looks like something is really going to get done sooner than later. I would hope so for both parties and for us all as fans, because that spices up the trade deadline. And I think if something gets done with Jimmy Butler, that really kind of sets the market for other guys. Another guy who we'll talk about in a minute, but also guys like Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic and Anthony Simons and Cam Johnson. And Jimmy Butler is a different player at a different point of his career than most of these guys. But he's still a guy who, in theory, can be a player who wills your team in the highest pressure moments. At least I think so. Some people may not think that anymore. I think he's still got some in the tank. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because the Miami Heat, as of today, they're 17-16. And as we know, the Eastern Conference has not been the best this year. We'll just say that. But the Miami Heat have been the 13th ranked offense and the 12th ranked defense so far this year. So they haven't been terrible. They have not been terrible statistically. But I feel like they should be better than they are. I feel like they should be even better than they are. They've blown some close games. Spo himself has blown some close games for them. Talking about that game in Detroit a few weeks ago. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which road the Miami Heat take, because if they can get off Jimmy Butler's money, and I'll segue into my second player here, they could be a real player for somebody either in the trade market or in the offseason to go and get, a guy who can help them win now. And that leads me into the second player who plays for a team that has had turnover of its own. And while we're here talking about them, I'm going to just touch on them in totality, because they are the strangest team in basketball to me right now. That's the Sacramento Kings. The Sacramento Kings. So to set the stage, we know 2 years ago, the Sacramento Kings, 3 seed in the Western Conference, best season they've had in like 15 years. Light the Beam is at its peak. They go into that playoff series against the Warriors. They take the Warriors to 7 games. Steph has to have that 50-point performance in Game 7 to will the Warriors to a win over the Kings. But the vibes are high. The vibes are high in Sacramento. Everything's great. De'Aaron Fox, All-NBA. Domantas Sabonis, All-Star, All-NBA caliber. You've got the 6th Man of the Year, Malik Monk. Everything is good. You draft Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray looks really, really good. And then you have last year. And although you're the 9 seed last year, you only lose 3 more games than the year before. And that's just a testament to how good the Western Conference was last season. So you beat the Warriors in the play-in game, and you have heroic efforts from Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray, and you ultimately end up losing to the Pelicans in the second play-in game. But still, you have moments last season that show that this team can compete, that this team is still a team capable of winning a lot of games. And now you get into this year, and you have the DeMar DeRozan acquisition in the offseason. And I'm not going to be one of these people who came up here and said that I foresaw that this would be a failed experiment. And I'm not even going to say that I'm not going to write it off as a failed experiment yet, because it's only technically been 35-ish games at this point. So I'm not going to say that yet. But if you would have told me in the offseason that by now they'd be under 500, they would be 13-19 a week ago, and Mike Brown would be fired, I would have said, oh no, what's going on? What's going on with the Kings? I would have thought that either De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis was hurt, or DeMar DeRozan, or a combination of those players. That's not the case. These guys have been on the floor for the most part. I know DeMar DeRozan's missed some time lately, but these guys have been on the floor for the most part. Statistically, they have not been that bad of a team. They have a top 10 offense. The Kings have a top 10 offense. Again, the Kings are a middle-of-the-pack defensive team, which was what they were so maligned for, in the past, for having a bottom-of-the-league defense. So statistically, they're not even that bad of a team. But I think the last 2 years showed how much they relied on their clutch game wins. And this year, they haven't had those games. They have lost a lot of clutch games. I watched the game the other night where they played Denver, and they had that game salted away. It looked like they had Denver done for. Denver comes back, takes the lead late on a run. Sacramento has an inbounds play. DeMar DeRozan has a wide open shot under the goal, and he drops it out of bounds. And shortly after that, I don't know if it was directly after that game or a game or two later, Mike Brown was fired. There's something not right. There's something not right with the Kings. And we've seen reports kind of subliminally about the tension between De'Aaron Fox and the organization, De'Aaron Fox and Mike Brown. While Mike Brown was the coach, I don't want to completely scapegoat Mike Brown's firing as just a horrific offense. I don't think it was deserved, though. But in his time, he did not play Keon Ellis this year almost at all, who was so integral in their success towards the end of last season, who really looked like he picked up some good momentum. Keon Ellis was getting DNPs. Keegan Murray this year, after shooting over 40% from three last year, is below 30. They're the team that takes the most mid-range jump shots in basketball by a wide margin. And you're going to get that when you have, DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox on the floor together. It's forcing Sabonis to take a lot more threes. He's making a good amount of them, but it's forcing a lot of their other guys to take more threes, more contested threes. The formula, in comparison to the rest of the NBA, it just didn't look like it aligned with what constitutes as winning basketball in the NBA regular season in 2024-2025. And like I said, I don't put that on Mike Brown, because you've got these great offensive players and you're going to let them do their thing. And it's not like these guys are having terrible seasons either. It's not like your main guys are having terrible seasons. It's so hard to put my finger on why this team was so underwhelming, other than they just didn't perform in the clutch. They didn't perform in the clutch and their shot diet, because they've been better defensively. Sure, Mike Brown wasn't perfect. He wasn't coach of the year caliber like he was a few years ago. But should he have been fired for the way they started the season? No, I don't think so. And I know a lot of other people agree with me. So, I say all that to say, when we get into these conversations about De'Aaron Fox and the potential that he could be moved, it's interesting because he also is up for a new contract this offseason. Sacramento and him tried to get a deal done this offseason and were unable to do so. So that kind of sets the stage as a lot of us would think, that he's probably on his way out, especially with all of this going on. And he hasn't come out like Jimmy Butler has explicitly and said, "Hey, I'm checked out. Like I can't find my joy playing basketball here." And funny enough, ever since Mike Brown has been fired, they are 4-0. They're dubbing the Warriors tonight. They're up by 20 on the Warriors. I don't know how much I take into that. I don't know how much I put into that. They're still 17-19 on the year, and that's not going to cut it, as we know, in the Western Conference. But hey, maybe Doug Christie could be the answer. Only time will tell. But speaking on De'Aaron Fox, a couple of teams have been linked to him early on in the process. I just want you to think about this. De'Aaron Fox, all-NBA caliber player, pushes the pace, has become a better playmaker, efficient, not the best defender as we know, but imagine him playing alongside Victor Wembanyama. And we've seen the Spurs this year. They're a team above 500. They played a doubleheader this weekend against the Denver Nuggets. They split the doubleheader, stole a game in Denver where Wembanyama was huge in shutting down Jokic down the stretch. Denver ultimately got them back last night in an overtime win where Jokic, of course, went for 44, 10, and 8. But the Spurs are looking like they're starting to hit their stride. And I know a lot of people are saying, like, the Spurs, should err on the side of patience. They shouldn't, go out hastily and make a move to disrupt some of what they've got going on right now. Don't speed up the process, right? And I wholeheartedly agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that frame of thought. But if a year from now you're sitting back and you're like, oh, but we're a good team. We have Wemby and he's a top 5 player in the league now. But we could have had De'Aaron Fox. I just don't think the Spurs should miss out on a chance at De'Aaron Fox if they have it. They've got a lot of draft capital from the DeJounte Murray trade to Atlanta, as well as their own. And I would assume the rest of the season that the Spurs will be no more than a play-in team at best. I think that's fair to assume. They are 1 game above 500 as of right now. And I think in the Western Conference, that'll put them around there, if not like the 11 seed or so. So the Spurs are one team, though, and another Texas team, the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets are a team who could potentially get in on De'Aaron Fox, who are a team so defensive-oriented and are really looking for their main guy. I know that they have guys step up. They're really by committee, and they have a lot of really great players. Really great players. And I love what Houston has done. They are really fun to watch. They dig in on the defensive end, and they look great. But I think it's going to take that go-getter to take them over the top. And I think they, like the Spurs, should err on the side of caution. But this is De'Aaron Fox we're talking about. And I think De'Aaron Fox, personally, has been the best name that's been on the market since Damian Lillard. Since the Damian Lillard trade in September of 2023. I think so. So you've got the Lakers in here as well, who look all right to start the year. I know they got off to a really good start. They've kind of cooled off of late. Anthony Davis is still playing really well. LeBron, of course, he's 40 though. But if you're looking to set something up potentially post LeBron, De'Aaron Fox is not a bad idea. I'm just saying, De'Aaron Fox would not be a bad idea. De'Aaron Fox, Anthony Davis, that sounds pretty good. You wouldn't go into rebuild mode. So these next few months are going to be very interesting to monitor with these two players, especially, along with a lot of other names. I expect the Jimmy Butler deal to get done within the next few weeks. I think it will. I think it'll get done in the next few weeks, at the latest, the trade deadline. With De'Aaron Fox, I think the De'Aaron Fox thing could be dragged out until maybe maybe the offseason, but I feel like that would be a big time loss for the Kings to not be able to salvage anything out of De'Aaron Fox, because all signs say that he's gone. All signs point to that. So that February 6th deadline, which is a month away from today, looms pretty big for a lot of teams. And while we're here, I'm going to touch on some of these teams who really need some help. I'm also going to dig into some of these teams at the top who I'm really excited about. I'm really, really excited about. But I want to talk about the Phoenix Suns, because as of today, the Phoenix Suns are even worse than the Sacramento Kings. And I feel like people aren't really talking about it a whole lot yet, because there's been so much discourse around Jimmy Butler and De'Aaron Fox and their respective teams. But the Suns are not good. The Suns are not good, and I know they've had some injuries. Kevin Durant has missed time, respectively. So has Devin Booker. But as of today, man, let's see. The Phoenix Suns, as of today, are 15-18. 15-18. And they, like the Sacramento Kings, have a top 10 offense. Their defense is 23rd, which we know with the players that they have, they're not going to have a great defense. And it's weird, right? Because Jusuf Nurkic just missed time as well. And when you watch Jusuf Nurkic on the floor, you may not be like, this guy, they need Jusuf Nurkic on the floor. Because when you watch him, he is not always the best player to watch. Trust me, I know. I spent a lot of years watching him on my team. But I think he does do a lot of the dirty work that led to them getting wins early in the season. And it's why they have started to fall off a little bit now, because Kevin Durant has still been pretty good. Devin Booker, although he hasn't been super efficient, has been solid. He's been a good playmaker. Tyus Jones is their point guard. I know I touched on Tyus Jones last time I was on here. Great, having a career-high three-point shooting season. There are guys like Royce O'Neal and Oso Ighodaro has stepped up. Monte Morris comes in and gives them minutes. I touched on Ryan Dunn last time. They're a team that just looks lost in the shuffle, though, in the Western Conference. They don't look like they can hang. I don't think they can. And when I think about those top teams like OKC and Memphis and Houston and Denver, and even to a lesser degree, Minnesota and Dallas this year, I don't think Phoenix stands a chance against these teams. I don't think Phoenix really does. So I think they've got to decide something. They've got to decide something. Maybe not this trade deadline. Kevin Durant himself, he's also 36 at this point, so he doesn't have much longer. We've seen them be involved in some trade rumors with Houston and potentially with Miami. So we'll see if Phoenix can get involved. They don't have a lot of money to spend with Bradley Beal's $50 million contract on the team, with their other two, big name guys. I don't know if they're second apron, but if they're not, they're very close to the second apron. Phoenix Suns are in no man's land right now. And it's weird to say because they play fun basketball. They play fun to watch basketball, but they're not a very good team. They're just not a very good team. I'll tell you who is a good team, though, who may not be as fun to watch, although I've had some fun watching them this year. The LA Clippers. If this was a buy or sell episode, and I was talking strictly for the rest of the regular season, maybe not playoffs, because I don't know how much I believe in the Clippers in the playoffs. The Clippers are a team to watch. The Clippers are really good. And that's something I did not expect going into the year. I had the Clippers as my 13 seed in the Western Conference. I thought that without Paul George and with Kawhi Leonard, being hurt and missing time, they were just going to fall. They were just going to fall. But James Harden, Zubac, Norman Powell, those three have really willed them to a really good start to the season. As of today, they're 20-15. They're a top 6 seed in the Western Conference, and they just got Kawhi back last night. We'll see how long Kawhi can stay on the floor. Fingers crossed, fingers very crossed that he can stay on the floor. But as find myself saying a lot of the time, shout out to Ty Lue, man. Ty Lue has been coaching his tail off over there in LA, and they have been really impressive. They've had some really impressive wins. They have a top 5 defense in the league. They just dig in. They dig in. James Harden, great playmaker still. We see flashes of vintage Harden from time to time on this team, and it's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch this team. I don't think the Clippers are getting a whole lot of buzz, and I think that they deserve it. I think that they deserve it, and a lot of the time, they play better when they fly under the radar. So maybe we should keep the Clippers low key, but I've been enjoying what I've been seeing from the Clippers. At the top of both of the standings, Eastern and Western Conference, Oklahoma City played a game against Boston today where they held Boston to 27 points in the second half. And I've been waiting for this game all year. It was a shame that it was on 2:30 on a Sunday afternoon where it's overshadowed by NFL, and it was on NBA TV, so it wasn't even an ESPN or TNT or ABC game. But OKC in that second half had those boys in jail, man. They had those boys in jail. Ever since Isaiah Hartenstein has come back to the lineup, listen to this. Ever since he's come back to the starting lineup, OKC is 20-1. 20-1. They are technically on a 15-game winning streak right now because that in-season tournament championship game against the Bucks technically did not count because that would have been the 83rd game for each of those teams. Shout out to the Bucks, by the way, for winning that game. I don't know if I can say shout out to the Bucks, though, speaking about them shortly, because they've lost back-to-back games to the Nets and the Blazers, so they don't look great. I think they're still on the up and up, but that's just me. Anyways, Aaron Wiggins on Friday against the Knicks in the fourth quarter led that team to a win. Today, I think it was Isaiah Hartenstein and obviously SGA's offensive heroics led that team to a win. I've said it before on this channel. I think that this is the year that OKC makes it over the top in the Western Conference. I think they're the team to beat, obviously, in the regular season. And I think they'll prove that in the postseason. Because looking at the Western Conference right now, the Memphis Grizzlies are the 2 seed. The Memphis Grizzlies have a lot of injuries. They've had games this year where they've looked amazing. They've had other games this year where you kind of scratch your head and you're like, this is the 2 seed? Houston is the 3 seed. As we touched on earlier, Houston's good. They dig in on the defensive end. They're great on the defensive end, but offensively, their identity still hasn't really been found, and they don't really have that number one go-to guy, in my opinion. These mid-tier teams like Minnesota and Dallas, who were so good last year, have had injuries, and with Minnesota, they've just looked... I don't know about Minnesota, man. Minnesota has just looked so strange. Anthony Edwards is coming off that 53-point game last night where they lost by double digits to the Pistons, man, without Jaden Ivey. By the way, prayers up to Jaden Ivey for that scary injury the other night. I hope he has a full recovery. But there's a lot of teams in the Western Conference who you kind of scratch your head through these first 35 games at. And I think the one team who you've consistently not had to do that for is OKC, and it's been far and away. They are far and away the best defense in the league still. Held Boston to 92 points for the entire game, by the way. 27 points in the second half for Boston. This isn't like the Jazz. This isn't the Toronto Raptors. This isn't the Wizards we're talking about. This is the Boston Celtics, the reigning champions. And they had everybody playing today. Everybody played. OKC's legit. They're legit. They'll get Chet Holmgren back here pretty soon, within the next couple of weeks, hopefully. This is the scariest team in basketball, in my opinion. It's the scariest team in basketball. We know the myriad of picks they have for the future, but even just right now, I know people with them are saying, like, go out and get this player, go out and get this player. They're one team that I will absolutely vehemently say no. Vehemently say no. Because they're 30-5 without it. They're amazing without it. They have the league's best net rating without it. They don't need it. And even if this year doesn't end up in a championship where they're holding up the trophy, even if they get a step further to the Western Conference Finals or to the finals, I think it's still a win for them. I would see it as a win because we know the future is theirs. We know the future is theirs. Anyways, though, in the East, Boston's hit 10 losses. I'll tell you a team who's not hit 10 losses. They haven't even hit 5 losses yet, and that's Cleveland. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 31-4, the league's best offense by far, the league's best three-point shooting team. Man. You know, I came on here last time, giving praises to Cleveland. They were undefeated at the time, and, they were playing great basketball, and they are still playing really good basketball. They still look amazing. They look amazing. Kenny Atkinson is the coach of the year, no question, at this point, in his first year in Cleveland. Shout out. I just have to give shout outs to this team. Like, all I can do is give shout outs because they've just played amazing basketball. And they really look like a threat this year. I think, last year and the year before, they made the playoffs. They were a top 5 seed in the East both years. But we didn't really take them seriously as a contender. We said, oh, yeah, the Cavs. Like, they had a good regular season. And Donovan Mitchell, yeah, he's a really good player. He's an All-NBA, second-team caliber player. He's really good. They have some good, secondary and tertiary guys. But they can't compete with Boston. They can't compete with New York. They can't compete with Milwaukee. It's just the way it is. Not this year. I'm going ahead and saying it right now. Not this year. I'm not saying Cleveland can beat Boston in a 7-game series. I would still take the Celtics. I would still take Boston. But I think Cleveland can hang. I think Cleveland could take it to 7. And I think Cleveland is capable of beating any other team in the East in a series. Their starting 5, I think, is the best starting 5 in basketball. They've also been a team who has been linked to Jimmy Butler. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't vehemently say no to that, but I'm not super excited by that prospect either. Their bench is interesting because they've played so well all year. They've played so well. Ty Jerome, Karis LeVert, obviously, Georges Niang, Sam Merrill. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Isaac Okoro. Max Strus just came back, by the way, so he's in the starting lineup, of course. But, man, their bench guys have played so good. Part of me is like, can they keep playing this well? I guess only time will tell. But they've done it so far. I was asking that question, through the first 10 games. We're almost halfway through the season now, and they've only been playing better than they did in the first 10 games. So, shout out to the Cavs. They've been playing really fun basketball. I think that they are no longer pretenders. I think that they are officially contenders at this point. So, yeah. That's a lot of what's new. You've got some mid-tier teams here in the East still. Like I said, the Milwaukee Bucks, they're really tricky. Because 1 week, they'll be the in-season tournament champions, and they'll run through the gauntlet, and Giannis is the MVP, everything, Milwaukee Bucks. Dame is playing great. Bobby Portis is, giving them a lot. Chris Middleton is looking solid. And then they'll have weeks like this one where they lose to the Nets, albeit they almost come back from a 23-point deficit in the last 5 minutes of the game. But then they lose to the Blazers last night, right afterwards. It's like, man, this team can't find any consistency. So, I really wanted before this little stretch to buy into the Bucks completely, but I can't do that yet. The Pacers have been playing better basketball. Tyrese Halliburton's been playing better basketball of late. They look like they're on the upward trail. The New York Knicks look good. Cat should be all-star starter. Jalen Brunson doing Jalen Brunson things. I haven't been watching a whole lot of Knicks basketball this year, though. I will admit that. I feel like I should be watching more. I think I'll start to tap into them a little bit more. I think Denver's been playing better basketball, especially since the last time I was on here. I wanted to say that. I was really skeptical of Denver's start to the season. They've had some injuries, too. with Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup. Who would have thought? Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup has been something that has really paid dividends for them, as Russell Westbrook is having a really good season so far in Denver. Makes me very happy to see. Denver's 20-14 as of tonight. They split those last 2 games with San Antonio. I think they're on the upward trail. And I think even a team like Minnesota, who I touched on earlier, who has had their ups and downs, I think Minnesota will get right. Dallas has gotten right, before the Luka injury. I think when Luka comes back, Dallas will be right. It just depends on how far they slip in the standings. So these mid-tier teams in each conference, it's going to be interesting to see who emerges. Philly is starting to make their way back up. They're getting closer and closer to 500. I think that they'll eventually get there, probably around like the All-Star break. It'll be interesting to see what seed in the Eastern Conference they end up getting. Tough breaks for Orlando with these injuries, man. Injuries to Paolo and Franz, of course. But who got hurt the other night? Jalen Suggs got hurt the other night. So it just feels like one thing after another for Orlando, who was off to a great start to the season. But those are just a couple of teams who I think have made some real noise, who have, made headlines. If I had to give like some players who I've really liked lately, because I know I did that last time, players I really like lately. I mean, I'm gonna be basic with this one and just say Vic. Vic on Christmas Day was cinema, man. He was cinema on Christmas Day, and although they lost that game, he was great. Had a 10-block game against my Blazers, followed by an 8-block game in the next game, I think against the Clippers, if I remember correctly, or like the Pelicans. Is one of those 2 teams, I think. Vic has been great. He's still chucking threes, but, we want him to do that over here. I like to see it. Go for it. The Spurs have been better than expected up until this point. So shout out to him. Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham, bona fide all-star this year. The Detroit Pistons, a 500 team. 500 team. At this time last year, the Detroit Pistons had 3 wins. 3 wins. They were 3-30. This year, they're 18-18. I think that deserves a round of applause. Cade Cunningham, though, one of the best assist men in the league. He's been pretty efficient shooting the ball lately. He has been willing that team to a lot of wins. Detroit's played a lot of clutch games, and Cade Cunningham has been really, really good down the stretch. Shout out to Malik Beasley. Malik Beasley has been playing some really good basketball, too. Been knocking down a lot of threes for that team. And their center position is weird, with Isaiah Stewart kind of playing better than Jalen Duren, kind of taking over that role at times. So they may have to figure that out. But definitely steps in the right direction for Detroit. Shout out to J.B. Bickerstaff, who, of course, was fired from Cleveland after last year and has done great things already in Detroit. After he got fired from Cleveland, you couldn't really say he was a bad coach because he was a top 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference the last 2 years. It just looked like Cleveland needed something new, and it's paying dividends for them. It's paying dividends for Detroit, so I think it's a win-win. One more guy. Let's see. I touched on Cat. Cat has been amazing lately. Let's see. I did want to say Jaren Jackson Jr. has been the best player on the Grizzlies all year. Defensively, we know what he is. We know who he is. He's going to anchor a top 5 defense in the league. Defensive player of the year a few years ago. But offensively, and it's something that, a lot of Grizzlies fans around me and even myself at times has been kind of critical of him about, is getting his own offensively and the shot selection that he kind of takes. It's been a lot better this year, where he's getting to the rim, he's getting to his little floater, and he's really dominating smaller defenders on his way to the basket. That's something that a lot of Grizzlies fans have wanted for a while now, but he's really kind of done that consistently this year, and it's paid dividends. It's paid dividends as Memphis is a top 5 offensive team in the league too, without Ja Morant really being there super consistently and popping off. That whole Grizzlies team, of course, is capable of just sparking it on any given night and going for 130, 140 points. Part of that is due to their pace. Part of that is due to their unorthodox offense, where they don't really use ball screens in the pick and roll. Just a lot of movement, a lot of good rookie play from guys like Jalen Wells and Zach Edey, and even Cam Spencer has come in and given them some minutes lately. Desmond Bain still hasn't even been really great. So I expect that to happen here soon. But yeah, those are just some of the things that have happened. In-season tournament was good, in my opinion. I know I haven't been on here since in-season tournament either. I'm sorry if this seems like a ramble. This is just kind of, my brain jumping from one thing to another with everything that's going on. There's a lot to cover, and it may be a little more structured if Jacob was here. And hopefully he will be here next episode. By the way, I don't even know if I can call this an episode, but what was I talking about? Oh yeah, in-season tournament. In-season tournament was good, and like I said with the Bucks, they looked really good over that stretch of games. Shout out to the Atlanta Hawks for making it. Obviously, they had that big win in Boston in group play to kind of propel them to get to the semifinals. I thought that game was a pretty good game between Milwaukee and Atlanta. And then the second game between OKC and Houston. Not a lot of offense in that game, but I liked it that way. I liked seeing what both teams did best, and I liked that was displayed on national TV, especially for a lot of people who hadn't really seen this rendition of Houston a lot yet. And even OKC. I feel like OKC is still pretty new on the scene to a lot of casual fans. Like, I don't think people know how good Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is. I don't think people really are aware of how incredible he is to watch on a night-to-night basis. And I hate that narratives have kind of come in and labeled him as a foul baiter, and, he doesn't really have a crazy, like, flashy or aesthetically pleasing bag, but he's got a bag. He's got a bag and a half. He's got a duffel, man. And if you're really tapped in and you're really watching, you can see that. And they're my favorite team to watch. Can you tell? They're my favorite team to watch. Houston is like top at least 5 for me. Maybe even top 3 this year. So to see those two play on national TV was a treat. Even though there wasn't a whole lot of offense, I liked the defense. And then the championship, it was a game where Milwaukee kind of controlled. OKC did not shoot well from 3. But even still, I liked that the best qualities of each team were on display in the game. And I think that made it a pretty good watch. Christmas Day games were good as well. Good close games. The Lakers versus Golden State with Austin Reeves hitting the game winner after Curry drills a crazy 3. A couple crazy 3s. Obviously the headliner, but that Knicks-Spurs game, even the Sixers-Celtics game in the afternoon where the Sixers end up going into Boston and getting a win. Kind of like what me and Jacob call that turnaround game so far this season, where they really are like, oh yeah, we're back. We're back in this thing. Because all 3 of their guys played that day. But big win for the Sixers that day. Timberwolves-Dallas was not very close for a while, but Dallas made it close at the end. And even the last game of the day between the Suns and the Nuggets was a good one. So the NBA has been fun. NBA has been fun lately. We've seen some hostile moments between guys like Amin Thompson and Tyler Hero. Obviously, the Warriors are going to have some antics. The Suns got into it with the Mavericks. Najee Marshall, Yusuf Nurkic, PJ Washington. So yeah, I feel like we're really starting to get into full swing. I feel like to start the season, it was all right, but it felt a little slow. We had some headlines to talk about. We had some teams who were kind of overachieving and underachieving who we could really focus on. But now I feel like we're really in it. I feel like we're really in it, and I feel like we've really caught our stride here in the NBA season. So expect to see me and hopefully Jacob on here more consistently. I know I say it often, but you will be seeing my face more often. I've really wanted to dig into this channel, talking NBA a lot more this year. So hopefully I can do that. Hopefully we can do that. And I'm sorry, like I said, if this didn't really have any structure, if this seemed like a ramble. It's weird to be talking by myself for like 45 minutes. You can just kind of see the state of my mind when it comes to these topics in the NBA. But I love talking about it. I love talking about it. And, maybe we dive deeper on some players and some teams going forward as we get closer to like All-Star break and eventually playoffs, of course. Rumors will be aplenty. There'll be plenty to talk about as always. So thank y'all. If y'all have listened up until this point, I hope you've uh, had as much enjoyment from the NBA season if you've been watching. I know a lot of people have been watching a lot of NFL and college football, as I have as well. But NBA is obviously my number one area of ball watching, and it will continue to go forward even more into the future as these other sports kind of come to a close. So expect to see me more. Hopefully Jacob will be back on here. Thank you all for watching as always, and peace out.